Dubro Suspicion Files.
Welcome back to the deep dive. When you hear the words Bermuda Triangle, what image does your mind conjure? For most of us, it's a terrifying blend of science fiction and history. Compasses spinning wildly, ships vanishing without a trace, and planes being swallowed by the ocean, due to forces unknown.
Right.
It has established itself quite firmly as the ultimate enduring mystery of the 20th century.
It absolutely has. But today, we are going to conduct an archaeological dig into that mystery. Because it wasn't built on centuries of phenomena.
No.
It was built on a single specific event. We are focusing on the singularity, the catastrophic event that generated the entire legend, the disappearance of Flight 19.
We're talking about a routine training mission, a patrol of 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, followed by the loss of a subsequent rescue plane, all in the afternoon of December 5, 1945.
27 men lost in total.
A staggering number.
Our mission today is to move beyond the superficial, sensationalized retelling that you might find in popular books or documentaries. We are conducting a forensic audit of the historical record. We are juxtaposing hard primary source data, U.S. Navy Board of Inquiry reports, radio logs, and official meteorological records against the cultural accretion and the sensationalist literature that turned a specific, tragic operational failure into a global paranormal phenomenon.
So we've been immersed in these comprehensive dossiers that focus entirely on the verified operational context of 1945. We are separating forensic fact from fabrication to trace the precise mechanics of the technical, the psychological, and the environmental failures that doomed those aircraft and those men.
And here is the paradox we are challenging you, the learner, to consider. How did a tragic but ultimately explicable operational accident, rooted in navigational error, pilot fatigue, and terrible weather, get culturally re-engineered into a supernatural mystery of global proportions?
That's the real question.
That's the real mystery we are solving today, the mystery of the myth itself.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start where they started. The specific, fragile, and often brutal environment of naval aviation just after World War II.
To truly grasp the disaster, you have to mentally transport yourself back to Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale in December 1945.
Right.
The war was technically over, but the industrial machinery of naval training was still grinding relentlessly. There was a desperate push to get aviators qualified, even amidst a rapid demobilization of forces.
That's a crucial frame. People imagine 1945 as a relaxing peacetime environment, but it wasn't. NAS Fort Lauderdale was a primary hub for qualifying pilots, often instructors who were transitioning from combat back to training roles, and training schedules were rigorous, sometimes exhausting.
And that's exactly why accidents were, regrettably, a grim statistical norm. The reality of aviation safety in that era was stark. There was no redundant safety net.
None at all.
Search and rescue SAR capabilities were slow, reactive, and often reliant on luck or visibility. And most critically for this story, modern air traffic control and comprehensive radar coverage over the vast stretches of the Atlantic they were flying simply did not exist.
So once you left the coast,
You were truly on your own.
which brings us directly to their primary methods of guidance. They had no GPS, no satellite guidance, and no robust ground radar to correct their course. They were reliant on 2 methods that, over water, were deeply inherently flawed.
Dead reckoning and pilotage.
Let's break those down. What is dead reckoning?
Dead reckoning, or DR, is the theoretical bedrock of mid-century navigation. It's essentially geometry in motion.
Okay.
You start from a known fixed point, in this case Fort Lauderdale, and you continually calculate your current position based on 3 variables: your known feed, the elapsed time, and the course you're steering.
It sounds beautifully scientific, like something that should work perfectly.
Well, it does work perfectly, but only in a vacuum. The moment wind drift is introduced, or your precise airspeed indicators are slightly off, or your time calculations are inaccurate by even a minute or 2, that calculated position begins to degrade exponentially. The longer you fly, the wider the margin of error becomes. A small navigational mistake in the first hour becomes a massive, unmanageable crisis 3 hours later.
So if dead reckoning fails, the pilot immediately falls back on the secondary visual method, pilotage.
Correct. Pilotage is flying by visual reference to landmarks. And here, the geography of the mission location, the Florida coast, and the scattered islands of the Bahamas was a massive hazard.
Why is that?
The small scattered cays of the Bahamas can look remarkably similar, particularly when viewed from high altitude or if visibility is reduced by rain or squalls.
So if a pilot lost confidence in their DR calculation over the open Atlantic, they were suddenly facing a terrifying, featureless void. They might spot islands, but without an immediate way to confirm which islands, they were effectively lost.
The margin for error was perilously slim.
Yeah.
You needed constant, reliable visual confirmation. And if you started doubting your instruments, your visual cues often betrayed you further because they didn't match your expected map.
Okay, let's talk about the specific machinery of this flight. The TBM Avenger torpedo bomber. The sources refer to it as the Iron Bird.
Yeah.
It sounds tough.
It was incredibly tough. Built by General Motors' Eastern Aircraft Division, it was the largest single-engine aircraft of the war. It was rugged, designed to operate off a carrier and absorb battle damage.
Yeah.
But toughness does not equal sophistication or navigational redundancy.
And this ruggedness hid significant technical vulnerabilities that played directly into Flight 19's fate. Let's start with its power source and its appetite.
The engine was the Wright R2620 Cyclone 14, reliable but fuel-hungry. The Avenger carried 335 gallons internally, giving it a theoretical range of around 1,000 miles. But that endurance was absolutely dependent on the pilot maintaining a conservative, precise power setting.
And what happens when a pilot realizes he's lost?
They panic. Often subconsciously, they increase power settings, they climb higher for better visibility, or push the throttle forward in a desperate attempt to cover distance faster.
Right.
Every decision made under disorientation, every minute spent searching, dramatically reduces the fuel reserve and therefore the available flight time. They're accelerating the clock towards zero.
But here's the detail that truly changes the risk calculation, and one that is consistently overlooked in the sensational accounts. The vulnerability regarding time and distance calculation for dead reckoning.
This is the single most shocking technical detail from the Navy reports. The TBM Avengers were not equipped with panel-mounted clocks.
Wait, what?
Think about that for a minute. These were multi-million-dollar naval aircraft, vital to national defense, yet their primary method of navigation dead reckoning required precise measurement of elapsed time, and the only tool they had for this was the pilot's personal wristwatches.
You're kidding. So we are talking about highly sensitive, high-stakes military maneuvers relying on a simple, non-standardized piece of personal equipment, a wind-up watch that could easily be misread, forgotten, or simply fail.
Exactly. If the pilot, Lieutenant Taylor, failed to wind his watch that morning, or misread it under the severe stress of realizing he was lost, or simply forgot to start timing a leg, his calculation of miles traveled degrades instantly. Time is distance in DR, and if the time measurement is flawed, the navigational error is guaranteed. That is a massive margin for error engineered right into the system.
And compounding that fragility is the compass issue. It wasn't just physical failure, it was the psychological failure to trust the technology they did have.
They relied absolutely on the gyroflux gate compass, an electrical instrument generally superior to magnetic compasses. However, it was susceptible to tumbling or failure under high G-forces or electrical strain.
So if it failed,
they were left with the standby magnetic compass, which is notoriously prone to oscillation and turning errors, especially in rough air.
But the greatest danger, as you mentioned, was compass vertigo. Let's slow down and explain that specific, life-threatening sensation for the learner.
Compass vertigo, or spatial disorientation, is a profound psychological and physiological state that affects pilots when they cannot rely on a visual horizon. The vestibular system in your inner ear provides your sense of balance. In turbulent air, or when visibility is obscured, your inner ear can be fooled into thinking the plane is banking or turning sharply.
So the pilot's brain is screaming, "We are turning left, sharply," based on physical sensation.
Exactly. But the instrument panel, the artificial horizon, the gyro compass, might be showing their level or turning much less severely. When the instruments contradict the pilot's overwhelming physical sensation, especially in a high-stress scenario, the pilot tends to distrust the instrument.
They think the machine is broken.
They may look at a perfectly functioning gauge and believe it is broken, leading them to disregard life-saving information and start flying an erroneous course based on what their inner ear is telling them.
And if Lieutenant Taylor was already stressed or fatigued, a point we will dive into in a moment, this susceptibility to vertigo and disorientation is dramatically increased.
And we must also briefly touch upon the Avengers' communication setup. The high-frequency and very high-frequency radio equipment was basic for the time and notoriously susceptible to atmospheric interference.
What kind of interference?
In 1945, there was also a high volume of signal bleed from powerful Cuban commercial broadcasting stations bouncing off the atmosphere.
So the tower is trying to transmit life-saving information, but Flight 19 is struggling to hear them over static and commercial music.
That is precisely what the radio logs indicate later in the flight. This overwhelming static plagued Flight 19's transmissions, making it incredibly difficult for the tower to clearly communicate triangulated positions or life-saving directions.
It's a perfect storm of primitive technology failing at the exact moment it was needed most.
It is.
So we have planes that rely on personal timepieces, a navigation method that is inherently fragile, a high-stress environment where pilots are susceptible to distrusting instruments, and a communication system that is being overwhelmed by static. That sets a truly dangerous operational foundation. Now let's move our forensic lens to the flight leader himself.
Ultimately, this tragedy was driven by human decisions, specifically the rapid cognitive breakdown of the flight leader, Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor.
Oh.
He was 28 years old, a seasoned aviator with 2,500 total flight hours, including a combat tour in the Pacific.
And that 2,500-hour number is central to the mythology, isn't it? Bermuda Triangle proponents constantly hold that number up to argue that he was too experienced to get lost, suggesting that only an external supernatural force could have confounded him so completely.
That is the experience paradox,
Yeah.
and it's a fallacy. Experience is not monolithic, it is specific.
Okay.
Taylor was proficient, yes, but his proficiency was anchored in specific geographies. He had recently transferred to Fort Lauderdale from NAS Miami, and his entire mental map of the region was based on the Florida Keys area.
And the distinction between the Florida Keys and the Bahamas is the singular tragic hinge upon which this entire event turns.
It is the moment the cognitive error becomes fatal. You have to understand the difference in terrain and what it means for a pilot who is already confused. If you are flying in the Florida Keys, the coastline is clear. If you lose your bearings, flying north or northeast will eventually intercept the massive, unmistakable landmass of the Florida Peninsula. It is a safe, reliable vector for correction.
But Flight 19 was not in the Keys. They were operating east of Florida in the Bahamas.
Correct. So when Taylor looks down and sees scattered islands, likely the Abacos or Andros, he experiences a phenomenon called false recognition. His brain retrofits the current, confusing visual information into the familiar pattern of his previous operational area, the Florida Keys.
And what is the deadly logic that flows from that false recognition?
His solution, based on the faulty premise that he's in the Keys, is to fly north-northeast to find the mainland. But flying north-northeast from their actual position in the Bahamas takes them directly into the infinite expanse of the open North Atlantic Ocean.
They're flying towards certain doom.
Entirely based on a fixed mental map that was 200 miles off course.
It sounds like a horrific type of cognitive rigidity, where instead of trusting a new calculation, he defaults to the only safe path he knows, even when the data contradicts it.
That cognitive rigidity is key. And what's fascinating here and suppressed by the mythmakers is that Taylor also had a documented history of being prone to this type of disorientation under stress.
This wasn't his first time getting completely lost.
Far from it. The Navy records show that on 2 separate occasions in the Pacific Theater, Taylor had lost his bearings in similar circumstances and been forced to ditch his aircraft at sea.
Wow.
This established a critical pattern. He was highly susceptible to spatial disorientation, and he displayed a rigid inability to switch navigation strategies when under extreme pressure. He had a history of failure in this exact scenario.
So he was the absolute worst choice to lead a flight into deteriorating weather conditions.
You could argue that, yes. And this inherent vulnerability was severely compounded by his physiological state on the morning of December 5th. He wasn't starting the flight fresh.
No.
Testimony from his colleagues suggests severe stress and fatigue. He arrived late to the mission briefing, delaying the entire flight. More critically, he actually requested to be relieved of duty, though he gave no official specific reason.
He asked not to fly.
He did. His request was denied because the base lacked a replacement instructor for the training exercise.
It's hard to imagine the pressure of being denied leave when you know you are physically unfit to fly, only to lead. What was it? 26 men into a rapidly deteriorating situation.
And witness accounts noted signs of acute distress or fatigue. The source material includes one witness who described Taylor as talking incoherently at times.
Incoherently.
Whether that was a severe hangover, simple exhaustion, or deep stress is impossible to definitively know now, but the outcome is the same. He was a compromised leader stepping into a scenario that demanded precise, calm, and flexible calculation.
Now let's look briefly at the other aviators. They were trainees, yet their strict adherence to military discipline might have, paradoxically, sealed their fate.
The flight included disciplined officers, specifically Marine Corps captains like Powers and Stivers. These were not undisciplined Green Cadets.
No.
Their flight hours were lower, around 300 hours on average, but their discipline and adherence to the naval chain of command were absolute. Taylor was the instructor, they were the students.
And this command structure, which is designed to be life-saving in combat, becomes tragically clear later in the radio logs when they realize they're flying toward oblivion.
Their discipline, their unwillingness to break formation, and their absolute inhibition against definitively challenging the instructor, even when they knew he was wrong, held them in place. The chain of command structure essentially inhibited the correct life-saving decision.
Which was to fly west.
Right. Until it was far too late.
The psychological dynamics were set for disaster before they even took off. Let's move to the timestamps, the minute-by-minute descent into disorientation.
The assignment was standard. Navigation problem number 1. A planned 316-mile route designed to last approximately 3 to 4 hours.
The route was precise. 4 legs, east for 56 miles to Hens and Chickens Shoals for bombing practice. Then continuing east for 67 miles. Third, a crucial north turn for 73 miles toward Grand Bahama Island, and finally the long southwest leg back to Fort Lauderdale.
A simple textbook triangle route over water. But before we trace the timeline, we must, as promised, destroy the most damaging fabrication of the Bermuda Triangle legend, the weather lie.
Absolutely. The myth, promulgated by Charles Berlitz, claims the day was sunny, calm, and clear, making the disappearance inherently inexplicable.
Right.
The official meteorological records emphatically contradict this.
Here's the verifiable reality from the Navy's source material. While the weather was initially favorable at takeoff at 14.10, conditions deteriorated rapidly. A major, fast-moving cold front was sweeping across the region, turning the late afternoon into a severe winter storm environment.
Let's talk specifics because this is vital to understanding the drift.
By late afternoon, we have records showing surface winds hitting 20 knots, frequently gusting to 31 knots. Crucially, the winds aloft, at the cruising altitude they would be flying, were reaching hurricane force.
Hurricane force.
75 miles per hour. This massive, unexpected wind drift from the southwest is the fundamental physical force that pushed them substantially off course to the east, setting up Taylor's disorientation.
So that 75-mile-per-hour wind isn't just a breeze, it's actively tearing them off course like a massive invisible river.
Exactly. If their dead reckoning calculation didn't account for that massive crosswind, and there's no evidence it did adequately, they would be tens of miles off target within an hour.
And the sea state.
The sea state was described as moderate to rough, with significant whitecaps and swells. When they eventually ran out of fuel, a water landing was extremely hazardous. This was a battle against a severe, documented winter storm front, not a peaceful glide into a mystical void.
Let's trace the collapse, starting with the routine phase.
14.10 departure. They're delayed slightly, but the squadron heads east.
15.0 routine phase. They successfully reach Hens and Chickens Shoals, complete their bombing runs, and everything is fine. The planes confirm their position.
15.40, the turn and the drift. They execute the north turn for Leg 3, attempting to locate Grand Bahama Island. But the extreme southwest winds have pushed them substantially east of their intended track.
So he looks down.
He looks for the expected visual references, and they fail to match his expectations for Grand Bahama. The initial confusion sets in.
15.45, the first distress.
This is it. The Navy tower intercepts a panicked query between the planes. Taylor, the flight leader, admits, "Cannot see land. We seem to be off course." And moments later, "We cannot be sure where we are." Repeat, "Cannot see land."
That statement is the first real sign of danger. It implies they have either overshot the islands or drifted into open water between cays, losing all visual continuity.
Which means their dead reckoning calculation was already fatally flawed.
And this brings us to 16.00, the Keys delusion. This is the first decision that puts them on the path to death.
Taylor makes the critical false recognition error. He radios, "Both my compasses are out, and I am trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I am over land, but it's broken. I'm sure I'm in the Keys, but I don't know how far down, and I don't know how to get to Fort Lauderdale."
Let's analyze the cognitive failure in that statement. He sees scattered islands, again, the Abacos or Andros in the Bahamas, but his deeply ingrained mental map, his Keys fixation, overwrites reality.
His logic is simple. If I am in the Keys, the land I need is to the north. So he orders the flight to fly north-northeast.
And the reality, they're east of Florida.
So that vector flies them straight into the massive open expanse of the North Atlantic, consuming precious fuel and reinforcing his belief that he's deeply lost.
He is chasing a ghost of a course line that exists only in his head, flying further away from the coastline that actually exists.
Exactly. And then at 16.25, the lost opportunity, an experienced pilot, Lieutenant Robert Cox, flying from nearby Port Everglades, intercepts their frantic radio transmissions and attempts to assist.
Cox offers a lifeline. What instructions does he receive from Taylor?
Cox hears Taylor confirm his catastrophic delusion. Both my compasses are out. I am sure I'm in the Keys.
He's doubling down.
He is. So based on this false information, Cox instructs them to put the setting sun on their port wing and fly north. When they follow this instruction and see nothing but endless ocean, Taylor's confusion deepens, leading to the second major cognitive error, the flip-flop.
The Gulf delusion. This is where the tragic irony becomes heartbreakingly clear.
Taylor reasons, I've flown northeast for so long and I haven't hit Florida. Therefore, I must have overflown Florida entirely, and I am now west of the mainland over the Gulf of Mexico.
He thinks he's in the Gulf of Mexico.
So if you were in the Gulf of Mexico, the way to find the coastline is to fly east.
Wait, so let me visualize this. They are in the Atlantic, likely north of the Bahamas and east of Florida. They are desperately close to the U.S. coastline. And he decides to fly 0-90 degrees, literally turning his back on safety.
That is the tragic, fatal decision. He orders the flight to turn east, directly away from the Atlantic coast of Florida and any possibility of safety. He is so convinced of his position that he believes flying toward the open sea is the way to find land.
The psychological conviction must have been absolute to override the visible reality of the endless ocean.
It was. And the time from 17:000 to 17:50 is documented in the radio logs as the mutiny on the airwaves.
What does that mean?
The student pilots, particularly the disciplined Marine Corps captains, realize the horrific truth. They know they flew east initially and never turned back far enough. Therefore, the only logical direction for safety is west.
This is the moment of crisis for the chain of command. The disciplined obedience breaks down under the imminent threat of death.
The sources provide that crucial, visceral quote from one of the student pilots, an anonymous voice of desperation. Damn it, if we could just fly west, we would get home. Head west, damn it.
They're arguing with him.
They are arguing in real time over the radio with their instructor about the fundamental direction they need to fly. This wasn't a silent, instantaneous vanishing. This was an agonizing 4-hour conversation about getting lost.
Meanwhile, what's happening on the ground?
Meanwhile, ground controllers, who had successfully triangulated the position north of the Bahamas and east of Florida, are frantically trying to radio Taylor with a life-saving message. Fly west, 270 degrees.
But it's not getting through.
It couldn't get through effectively, primarily due to two factors: the overwhelming atmospheric interference we discussed earlier, and Taylor's final fatal leadership decision.
Which was?
The refusal to switch frequency. Taylor refused to switch the entire flight to the emergency frequency as instructed by the ground controllers. His reason, documented in the inquiry: he feared losing unit cohesion.
Oh, no.
He believed that forcing the students to switch frequencies in the dark and the storm would break their communication link with him, the leader.
So he prioritized maintaining a fragile connection among his confused team over receiving the single life-saving piece of verified directional information from the shore. That is a textbook example of leadership failure under stress.
A decision that absolutely sealed their fate.
By 18.04, fuel critical.
The effect of Taylor's indecision and the constant zigzagging has consumed nearly all their fuel. He is still oscillating between his two incorrect conclusions. The sources quote him saying, "Holding 270. We didn't fly far enough east. We may as well just turn around and fly east again."
That indecision is burning the last drops of their fuel. The sun had set at 17.29. They are now operating in total darkness, in a storm, with zero visibility, and fuel gauges hitting empty.
The last coherent transmission comes at 18.20, the final command. Taylor issues the directive for a simultaneous ditching.
What did he say?
All planes close up tight. We'll have to ditch unless landfall. When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together.
While simultaneous ditching was standard naval doctrine to consolidate survivors and facilitate rescue, doing it in 30-foot swells and pitch-black darkness made a successful water landing.
Virtually impossible. They ran out of fuel and crashed, likely between 19.0 and 20,000. Given the sheer weight of the TBM Avenger's right engines, which were mounted far forward, the airframes would have inverted, broken apart rapidly, and sunk almost instantly in those heavy seas.
They were not swallowed whole.
They succumbed to gravity, physics, and a lack of fuel.
A 4-hour descent into disaster communicated to the world until the very end. But the tragedy didn't stop there.
The initial loss of Flight 19 was a known industrial-scale tragedy. It was the loss of the subsequent rescue plane that provided the second and arguably more potent ingredient for the paranormal narrative.
Let's discuss the rescue plane, the Martin PBM-5 Mariner tail number training 49, which took off at 19.27 with 13 crewmen to begin the search. This plane had a deeply troubling known design flaw, didn't it?
It was a massive flying boat designed for long patrols, but structurally, it was a catastrophe waiting to happen. It was infamously nicknamed the flying gas tank.
Not a flying gas tank.
The flaw was that the fuel tanks were integrated directly into the whole structure, and they had a known tendency to leak fuel vapors into the bilges in the fuselage.
So accumulated fuel vapor means the slightest spark static electricity, a frayed wire, or an electrical malfunction could turn the plane into an instantaneous bomb.
Precisely. Naval procedure mandated strict smoking bans and regular hull ventilation to manage this exact threat. It was a well-known, accepted susceptibility within the naval aviation community.
They knew the risk.
They knew the risk every time they flew that aircraft.
And at 1950, only 23 minutes after taking off, the disaster struck. Crucially, the PBM-5 did not vanish silently into a void.
No, it suffered a catastrophic structural failure and exploded in plain sight. We have a direct witness report from the tanker SS Gaines Mills, sailing off the coast near New Smyrna Beach.
What did they see?
Captain Shona Stanley reported that his crew observed a burst of flames, apparently an explosion, leaping flames 100 feet high and burning for 10 minutes.
100 feet high? That is an unmistakable sign of a massive fuel-air explosion.
The Gaines Mills actually maneuvered through the resulting pool of oil and gasoline, but found no survivors. Furthermore, the escort carrier USS Solomons reported losing radar contact with an aircraft at that exact time and position.
So the evidence is conclusive.
The PBM Mariner exploded due to the ignition of accumulated fuel vapor, an industrial tragedy witnessed and documented. It was not supernatural.
So we have two tragedies, both entirely explicable by the specific design flaws, operational limitations, and severe weather conditions of 1945. Yet the myth explodes because of the Navy's subsequent investigation.
The Navy's Board of Inquiry conducted an exhaustive, if painful, investigation. Their initial conclusion was clear, and it placed blame squarely on Lintan Taylor.
The original finding was a damning condemnation. Taylor became so hopelessly confused as to have suffered something akin to mental aberration.
That's a powerful statement of cognitive failure.
It is.
But they had to acknowledge the elephant in the room, the lack of physical wreckage. This is where bureaucratic mercy, driven by intense personal lobbying, intervened.
Tell us about Catherine Taylor, Lieutenant Taylor's mother.
Catherine Taylor refused to accept the verdict that her son was responsible for the death of 26 men. She intensely lobbied the Navy, arguing they could not definitively prove his instruments hadn't failed without finding the physical wreckage.
She needed that ambiguity for peace of mind and to preserve his military honor.
Yes, and the Navy, in 1947, responded to this request out of a desire to spare a grieving mother unnecessary pain. They amended the official report.
This single bureaucratic act is the single most important moment in the history of the Bermuda Triangle myth.
The revised finding attributed the loss to causes or reasons unknown.
That seemingly innocuous phrase, cause unknown, was the seed, wasn't it? It wasn't intended to suggest a supernatural event.
Absolutely not. It was a formal bureaucratic concession, acknowledging a lack of physical evidence to definitively prove instrument failure or pilot error, thus clearing Taylor of absolute blame in the official record. But it was immediately interpreted by subsequent writers not as we lack physical proof, but as we encountered something unexplainable that defies human logic. The administrative mercy became the origin story for the paranormal.
The moment the Navy wrote cause unknown, they handed the keys to the mythmakers.
Once that administrative seed was planted, the cause unknown verdict, the professional storytellers quickly moved to fill the informational vacuum with highly profitable fantasy.
We have to credit Vincent Gaddis first. In 1964, he wrote an article in Argosy magazine called The Deadly Bermuda Triangle, coining the term and weaving Flight 19 into a tapestry of other, often unrelated maritime and aviation incidents.
Gaddis provided the geographical construct. But the true architect of the global mainstream myth was Charles Berlitz. His 1974 mega bestseller, The Bermuda Triangle, took the story and amplified every ambiguity while, crucially, inventing details that simply did not exist in any official record.
His work is responsible for the most indelible, most chilling fabrication of the entire saga, the outer space.
The sheer audacity of the fabrication is what made it so successful. Berlitz claimed, and this has been repeated countless times since, that Taylor radioed his final cryptic message. "Don't come after me. They look like they are from outer space."
Let's be crystal clear for the learner. We have checked the Navy's official, verified contemporaneous transcripts and radio logs.
Yes.
That line appears in 0 of them.
It is a total fabrication, invented wholesale by Berlitz to introduce an element of cosmic horror that the operational data entirely lacked.
So where did that idea even come from? Was it pure invention or a deliberate manipulation of an actual quote?
It's highly likely it was an amplification and distortion of an actual, but entirely mundane, exchange. We know Taylor did radio 𝐏𝐿 the rescue pilot, saying,
Yeah.
"Don't come after me."
Right.
But he said that to keep the rescue pilot out of the severe, dangerous storm he was flying into, not because of alien threats, Berlitz simply added the supernatural element. They look like they are from outer space, to sell a mystery that wasn't mysterious.
And the second major lie that Berlitz pushed was the systematic suppression of the weather data, which is perhaps the most egregious intellectual sin of the book.
He consistently described the day as sunny, clear, and calm, actively suppressing all official reports of the cold front, the gale force winds, the scattered squalls, and the rough seas that we detailed earlier.
And why?
Why? Because the calmer the sea, the more mysterious the vanishing. If the weather is calm, you need a supernatural force. If the weather is a Category 1 hurricane, you need physics.
It's a powerful illustration of how easy it is to replace operational failure with extraordinary explanation simply by removing 1 or 2 critical facts, like the weather or the pilot's history, from the record. Despite the overwhelming forensic evidence pointing to human error and weather, the search for the physical wreckage of Flight 19 continues, largely fueled by renewed media interest every few decades.
We had the massive media frenzy in 1991 when deep-sea salvager Graham Hawkes found 5 TBM Avengers clustered together on the seafloor off the coast of Florida.
Yeah, I remember this. For a brief moment, everyone assumed the mystery was solved.
It was a stunning development, but the assumption was premature. The reality check came when researchers inspected the tail numbers. The aircraft were clustered within a mile, which is an amazing statistical coincidence, but once identified, it was determined these were 5 different Avengers that had crashed on 5 different days over several years.
What's the ultimate takeaway from that discovery?
The significance is not that it solved the mystery of Flight 19, but that it underscored the sheer frequency of aviation accidents in that specific geographic region during and immediately after the war. The clustering proves that aviation accidents were a routine occurrence there, not an extraordinary one.
So it reinforces the Navy's original conclusion about operational dangers.
Exactly.
More recently, searches have continued with advanced technology. We have sources mentioning a 2022 search by a History Channel team using high-tech sonar and magnetometers.
The difficulty remains finding specific aluminum wreckage from 1945 on the vast, often shifting ocean floor. The 2022 search did not find Flight 19, but they did find a massive section of the Space Shuttle Challenger, lost in 1986.
That dramatically underscores the difficulty. The ocean floor is a vast debris junkyard. The Challenger, lost decades later, is huge and specific, yet it was missed for years. Finding 5 1945 aluminum planes likely crushed and silted over is nearly impossible.
As of 2025, no verified trace of Flight 19 or the PBM Mariner has been found. But as we keep reminding the learner, lack of physical wreckage does not equate to unexplained vanishing.
Exactly. Let's distill the core facts one final time, contrasting the enduring, profitable myth with the verified reality, straight from the source material.
The enduring myth. The weather was calm, sunny, and clear.
The verified reality. Gale force winds, 30-foot swells, and a dangerous winter storm front swept the region, pushing them dangerously off course.
The enduring myth. Taylor was an ace pilot, too experienced to get lost.
The verified reality. He was experienced, yes, but he had a documented history of geographical disorientation and had been forced to dish twice before in the Pacific.
The enduring myth. They vanished instantly, cut off mid-sentence by an unknown force.
The verified reality. They flew for over 4 hours, communicating their entire descent into confusion and disorientation until the final moments of fuel starvation, crashing into heavy seas.
The enduring myth. The chilling quote. Don't come after me. They look like they're from outer space.
The verified reality. A complete fabrication. The line never appears in any official logs, invented entirely by sensationalist authors.
The enduring myth. The rescue plane vanished too, doubling the mystery.
The verified reality. The PBM Mariner exploded mid-air due to a known fuel vapor leak, witnessed and documented by the SS Gaines Mills.
And finally, the enduring myth. The Navy covered up the truth, suggesting something mysterious happened.
The verified reality. The cause unknown finding was a bureaucratic concession granted out of mercy to Lieutenant Taylor's grieving mother, not a deliberate suppression of evidence regarding extraterrestrial involvement. It was designed to spare the family the stigma of pilot error.
If we synthesize all these findings from the official reports, the loss of Flight 19 was truly a perfect storm of fallibility. It required the precise combination of geographical displacement, the fatal confusion between the Keys and the Bahamas, a compromised leader prone to disorientation, the use of primitive, non-standardized timepieces, high-stress conditions, radio interference, and severe unforecasted weather.
And the planes.
The planes simply ran out of fuel, crashed in darkness into high, storm-churned seas, and sank instantly due to their heavy engines.
The true mystery is therefore not what happened to the planes. They met a predictable, tragic end, unfortunately common for naval aviation of that era.
Right.
The true mystery is how this single, tragic operational accident was transformed into one of the world's most enduring paranormal stories. It is a testament to the fact that people often prefer a grand, unanswerable mystery over a painfully simple human failure.
The Bermuda Triangle, in the context of Flight 19, is less a geographical anomaly caused by magnetic disturbances and more a cultural phenomenon built upon the confluence of human error and bureaucratic wording that left a silence.
A silence that sensationalism was happy to fill. So here's the provocative thought for you, the learner, to contemplate as you wrap up this deep dive. Consider how often simple human errors, like a pilot's psychological keys fixation, or the fatal leadership decision to refuse to switch a radio frequency due to a flawed understanding of unit cohesion, are far more devastating and final than any unknown external phenomenon.
And how easily culture embraces extraordinary explanations for ordinary painful tragedies.